Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins podcast with your host, Ashley Crowder.
Hi, welcome to Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins. I'm your host, Ashley Crowder, co-founder of VNTANA, and I'm so excited to be here today with Anna Violette, solutions consultant at Adobe Substance, who also used to work at VNTANA. So we've known her for a long time. She's incredibly knowledgeable about real-time materials and 3D models. And so, Anna, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Ashley. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in. So, you've been working in the 3D space for a long, long time. Would love to hear, just your background of how you got into 3D and what your different design experiences.
Sure. Yeah. So I started my 3D journey back in college. Of course, I have to learn those when I become an artist. You have to learn all your typical SolidWorks and Keyshot and all that good stuff. So I learned in college, but I really wanted to go into the fashion industry, and there was not a lot of courses teaching 3D softwares in that. So I was self-taught. So I learned Clo, I learned Browseware using the resources that they provided. From there, I actually landed a job in the 3D fashion world. I started with Under Armour and a little bit of VF as well, working in Browseware, working in Clo, like really honing in those skills, getting to know the 3D landscape. Because it's so different when you transition into fashion. It's just a whole nother language. So I learned a lot about, just very technical skills. After that, I actually came to VNTANA. So I was there as your digital, what was my title? A 3D apparel specialist.
Yeah.
So I got to work with all of your amazing clients. They would send me their issues. I would figure them out. And in that process, I learned so much more about 3D than I could ever imagine. All of the intricacies, all of the nuances between programs, talking to each other, learning from each other. So that was a really valuable job that I had. And then after that, I landed this job here at Adobe as a solutions consultant. A lot of the same things. I get to talk to all of our amazing clients, not only in apparel, but now I get to talk to people in like consumer packaging. I get to talk to people in medical, construction, engineering, all of that fun extra stuff that I was exposed to back in school. So now I get to do demonstrations of our product, teach design teams how to use Adobe Substance, and just build relationships and learn even more about 3D.
Awesome. Yeah, we really throw people in the deep end.
Yeah.
Like, you'll figure it out. It'll be good.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. So apparel is its own world. So when you think about apparel, it's fabrics, which have their own complexities with materials compared to consumer packaged goods and CAD, which tend to be hard surfaces, which is like a very different problem in 3D graphics. But it's great that you get to work across the board now because, to your point, every single industry is benefiting from 3D. So designing in 3D results in better products, and you can automate 2D renders to reduce your time and cost of content creation. But one of kind of the core issues around that is, are you doing pre-rendered or real time? And I know that was something that you've done a lot of coaching and teaching with clients at VNTANA, and I'm sure Adobe too, of what is that difference and why does it matter? So can you dive in, what is PBR and real-time materials and why does that matter? Why do people need to know about it?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. It's what I do every day. So PBR, real-time materials, it's really just replicating real world materials, the physics, all that like nuance between, a pearl versus a linen versus, steel, all of those different aspects of that, just being replicated in a virtual world. So they're very important when you're trying to communicate what your product does, what it looks like. Materials is number one across the board. It's also really amazing to have real-time materials because you can use them in many different ways. So you can do it through virtual try-ons, e-commerce, just creating digital twins. So materials is really what's communicating what your 3D objects are, and then bringing them across all different kinds of worlds in that virtual realm.
Totally. So to summarize, it's like having real-time materials lets you do that real world physics. So if you're an industrial person, bringing it into a game engine and running simulations, or if you're consumer goods, you have to have it to work on the web, as simple as that. And how is it, Adobe Substance is an amazing tool to be able to get real-time materials quickly. So, talk a little bit about, how people are using Substance to create physically accurate materials and maintain realism.
Yeah, so Substance is great for materials, but we do a lot of things. We have a suite of 5 applications. 2 are dedicated to materials, which is really our core. And then we go into texturing, we go into rendering, everything like that. But materials is really where we are true to ourselves. So we have Substance Designer. This is where you can build out completely, virtual 3D materials that started from scratch. You don't have a real world example of it. And then Sampler, which is where you can sample from real life. So if you do have, scans of fabrics, or if you have pictures from, an on-site job where you took a photo on your iPhone, you can then convert those into real-time materials. So then you can use them to create more accurate digital twins of your 3D objects.
Yeah, it's great. We suggest Substance to so many of our clients, and particularly to build out a standard material library for your company. So also that like everyone's using the same material, so there's consistency across the board. And so I know you've talked a lot about that with people. What are some of the best practices that you suggest for people when they're starting to get into all this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk to a lot of people that have access to libraries of materials, physical materials like that you can actually grab onto. But you're right, like creating consistency across your physical to your digital objects is really important. And it does start with materials. So when you're starting to get into this, you really just need to get a nice scan or a nice photo of your materials so that you're accurately depicting them in the 3D world, with as much clarity, as much information as possible. So I always recommend like a nice scanner or just a high quality photo, honestly. But we make it very easy using Substance. Sampler is a great example of this. It's really as simple as just dragging in those images, and Sampler does all the heavy lifting of having to create the additional maps that you need for a PBR or a real-time material. So, you don't really need too much knowledge. You just really need to know how to drag and drop.
Which is great. It's amazing
Yeah.
because, as we talk about a lot, it's no longer like necessarily a 3D artist creating this content. It's a fashion designer who happens to be doing 3D. It's a CPG package designer who now 3D has moved across every industry. And so it's not just a 3D specific job anymore. It's really permeating the ecosystem, which is exciting. And so talk to me a little bit about the different use cases of 3D. So between fashion, CPG, and automotive, right? Like they're totally different categories, even medical you mentioned. So would love to hear just the difference between different industries and how they're using this technology.
Yeah. I mean, they're all so different and they all share very similar ideas. So number one, I mean, we've been talking this whole time about materials. Everyone is digitizing their materials. So, fashion is using it to create accurate 3D renders of their garments. Medical is using it to communicate accuracy within their tools. I've also seen medical start to use it for more intricate, like down to the details, DNA and like microbes and all that fun stuff, really pushing the boundaries of what 3D is capable of doing. Packaging is also a really great example. You know, they're able to create their 3D models before they even see it in the real world. You know, and that eventually leads to lower costs, faster timelines, and that's really across the board. We see that in fashion, we see that in architecture, we see that in medical. So they're really sharing a lot of those common principles, which is really awesome, so that we can have that conversation throughout every industry.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're seeing the same thing. So we kind of divide the two into B2B businesses and consumer facing businesses. And, you know, both automating 2D renders and being able to review that design. It's that early like design development phase. It speeds
Yeah.
everything up. And then same with sales. So with B2B, it's much more of a high touch sale, but being able to walk people through a 3D version of a product just gives them such a better understanding, which is a little more hands-on. You know, clients like Aztec are actually bringing Quest headsets to plant sites to be able to put it on and see, oh, this is what this big piece of machinery is going to look like, you know, when we update your plant, versus the consumers where it's like everyone's now used to seeing View in Your Room on Amazon, you know, and 3D on Google, which is proving to increase sales, which is exciting. But getting back to kind of Adobe, so, you know, it's an incredible way to create a great material library. How does Adobe integrate with different platforms? You know, with like Ventana, we work with you guys pretty closely, but how can this help like streamline publishing 3D content, you know,
Mhm.
across different platforms?
Yeah, Adobe. Adobe is sort of the, you know, when you think about our 2D programs like Photoshop and Illustrator, they're sort of in this zeitgeist. Everyone sort of knows exactly what you're talking about when you mention those programs. And Substance is starting to, you know, gain its foothold in that. And Substance, we like to say that we work really well with others. I think if you're giving us a report card, we try our best to, you know, make sure that everyone's included in the conversation. And a lot of that stems back to our material creation. So we have a software, or sorry, a extension. So our SBSAR, our substance materials, they work really well in whatever programs that you're using. If you're using Blender, if you're using Max, Maya, Unreal, Clo, Browseware, we integrate within those programs. So we're bringing our materials to you. And within that same vein, too, we're also a part of the Alliance for Open USD. So we're trying our best to make sure that everyone has access to USD files, which is becoming the standard for 3D files. So we are really pushing that initiative to make sure that everyone has access, everyone's able to use it, and it's easy for them to use. I know that you mentioned before, Ashley, it's like this push from 2D to 3D. And we're really trying to be a part of that conversation because, you know, 3D is a really niche world, but it's becoming more of the standard. So we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable in there.
Yeah, and to your point, with USD, so for those who don't know, that there's hundreds of 3D file formats, which has really been the problem, right?
Yeah.
So there's hundreds of 3D file formats, and some are specific to specific programs only. But when you're trying to put a 3D shoe on your ecom site and you want to make sure everyone's looking at the same thing, standards are essential. So just like we have JPEG and PNG, it's looking like we're having USD and GLB. So, you know, I actually had one of our past talks was with someone from the Kronos group that's pushing the standard of GLB, which is a really efficient format that's good for publishing. And we're actually going to have a future podcast with someone from OpenUSD who actually works at NVIDIA, which I'm really excited about, because USD is also really important because it allows for a lot more complex things within 3D and design. And it's a really great transition format. And so, you know, I always say, just like we have JPEG and PNG, I think we're going to need two. I think we're going to need
Oh
USD
yeah.
and GLB. But it's so great that big players like Adobe are pushing and contributing to these standards, because it's going to take all of us agreeing to use them to make it easy for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know getting us all on the same page is definitely number one. So, but I agree. I think having access to all these 3D files is important. So, making sure we have a standard is going to help with that.
Definitely. And so, kind of switching back to materials, I mean, there's so much changing with AI to auto generate materials. I was reading Meta published a paper recently with Llama being able to auto generate materials. I mean, where do you see the future of this going? Like, what are you most excited about over the next year, like 1 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good point. Adobe is definitely doing a lot with our Firefly, which is our AI tool. So we're starting to see that integrate into the Substance software. Right now, we're integrated into Substance Sampler. So there's a text to texture and a text to pattern feature within Sampler. It's been really powerful. I've used it a lot myself. Not having access to a certain, cotton sample that I want, I can just ask Firefly to generate something for me. We're also seeing it in Substance Stager, which is our virtual photography tool. Just a little bit less. It's more of like a text to background. I think I'm most excited about our sampler integration. So that's really where we're playing with like our AI tools, and hopefully we'll start to see it more within our other applications, Painter, Designer maybe. So hopefully that comes in the next 5 years. I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah.
not privy to that information.
Yeah, no, we're
Yeah.
so excited about that, especially
Yeah.
when we think about like the AEC market and industrial, because so much of it is designed in AutoCAD or Siemens NX or similar SolidWorks, and they don't really have good materials.
Mhm.
It's pretty basic. So being able to take that and auto generate beautiful real-time materials can actually we're, as you know, I've been talking, we're big proponents of like go from design to sales and marketing everywhere, to really help automate that. So yeah, we're super excited about that. And Firefly is a great tool. So how do you see partnerships between, Adobe and platforms like Ventana shaping the future of 3D workflows and immersive commerce and beyond? Like what are some of the use cases you're seeing now, and where do you see this going over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think, it sort of goes back to what we were just saying about making sure we're all on the same page. So, Adobe and Ventana's partnership is really awesome because we share a lot of clients. We direct people to each other. I know having having tools across the life cycle of a 3D product is going to be so huge, especially if you're starting to get into this 3D world. So, Substance does textures really well. Ventana does optimization and, pushing to e-commerce really well. So just making sure that we have all of those tools covered is going to be so important for future projects and, whatever your company's throwing at you. So I'm really excited about, seeing who's popping up in this industry, where we can start to solve bigger problems, and making sure that we're supporting each other.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about the 3D interoperability problem, that, OpenUSD and Kronos and GLB are trying to solve. What are some of those other problem areas that Adobe and others are working on? Like what are some of those difficulties? I know we could talk about fur all day.
Oh my gosh, I know. Yeah, fur is number one. I see it all the time. Fur, shearling, all that fun stuff within the fashion world. But that's actually a really good point. I think, I can't speak for everyone, but I would hope to see us starting to solve those really small problems that we're seeing pop up. I think across the industry, I mean, using fur as an example, whenever someone brings it up, we're like, oh, well, you can't
You
do
can't
fur
do
in
for
here.
real time. You just can't.
Yeah,
It's
you just can't.
yeah.
So, it would be great to start to solve issues like that. And, I talk to clients all day who are like, we want to see measuring tools, or we want to be able to, bring top stitching in, using, tools that exist within our 2D program. So I hope to start seeing that pop up in newer or later releases of our program. So I really think it comes down to like community talking to each other, making sure that we're all aligned on what's working and what's not working. And it helps to have like podcasts like this, channels where we can actually like bring those to light. Um, I remember what I think I was early in my career and I saw a scan of a shearling boot. I think I was at VF at the time. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this looks so bad. I can't show this to anybody. And I
Yeah.
did. And they're like, oh, no, we know. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, real-time rendering has its limitations still. So fur and things like hair and shearling are definitely part of that. So
yeah.
for all those listening, OpenUSD and Chronos, please solve it. And if you're a large company, push your partners like Adobe and the bigger you are, the more people listen. So that's
Yeah.
why, at Ventana with our clients, we're like, Michael Kors, go complain, to Chloe or whoever to make them fix this. And I know displacement maps are another one. So with
Mhm.
lots of fashion, you've got logos that have that slight raise to them.
Yep.
And doing that slight raise with a displacement map is what most people have done, but that only works in traditional rendering. Real-time rendering, you can kind of approximate it with a normal map. And I know I've brought this up to the Chronos group a lot, and they're actually working on a project now to help solve this and have an option for GLB, which is great. So
Great.
yes, the
Yeah.
louder we all are,
Yeah,
the more
definitely.
people
It's
listen.
It's funny too, because I'm in a position where I get to speak to all different kinds of people in all different kinds of roles. So I get to see the trends of what's brought up. And one that recently has been brought up most is our embroidery tool, which is really, really cool and sampler. And it's always being updated and talked about, but they're like, I want to be able to do this and this. So I hear it a lot and I get to, bring that feedback directly to our sampler team, so we can actually find solutions. So it does make a difference if you're loud about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, so I know we talked a little bit about advice to brands and creators looking to adopt 3D and digital twin technology. And one of the things is, building that consistent library. So everyone in your company is accessing the same materials, not only consistency, but then you don't have people just rebuilding the same things. But if you're a smaller company out there with limited resources, what's some advice specifically to them? How can they use, these tools?
I think my best advice for them would be start small, but think big. So identifying specific problems in your 3D or digital twin, workflow, can really reduce your issues, further down the line. So if you're really focusing on, solving this one problem, you might see that it's actually solving 10 more down the line. So, investing in your tools, making sure that you're talking to the right people, you're in the right channels, that can really help you, make sure that you're ultimately thinking big. And just making sure your team has access to all these free resources, and knowing where they are. So YouTube is always a great option, but even just emailing someone like me or Ashley to make sure that you're really understanding your tools, is really important.
Yeah, pretty much every software platform now has great customer support because we all want you to be able to easily use our tools. And so,
Yeah.
and we understand 3D is new and a lot of education is still required. So with that, Anna, where can people get a hold of you and or, other resources at Adobe Substance?
Definitely. Well, you could find me on LinkedIn, but we also have a whole Substance tutorials. I believe the web address is substance3d.adobe.com. So those are our official trainings, but we also have really amazing artists within our Substance team who produce YouTube tutorials that are more specific. They're more engaged in the community. So people like Wes McDermott, Michael Tanzillo, Vincent Go, Louise Millen. She's amazing. They all have very specific things that they do. So check them out on YouTube. I know some are active on Instagram as well. And they are always coming out with new tutorials and new smaller videos to make sure that you're aware of our changes and just get you up to speed on our tools.
Awesome. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to continue working with you. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ashley.